All right, so again, this lecture is going to be weird because this is talking about what was going on in college, which is a lot of weird stuff going on. But so I'm even reluctant to say some of this stuff because it's going to make people think that I'm making it up because it's like kind of super normal, right? Kind of abnormal, but just like like I said, my whole life I had OCD kind of where I would do things in threes. And I just interestingly heard that Nikola Tesla kind of did that. Like I would go 1, 2, 3. When I would like go up a rail, I would always go 1, 2, and then I'd 3. It's like evening it out. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I would do things where I would count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, look up the highest spot, look down at the lowest spot. And like so it's OCD. It's like you have a obsessive you have compulsions. Those are the compulsions, and they relieve anxiety. And then you have obsessive thoughts. And like, like one thing I would think would be like, okay, if I don't do this ritual where I put my head up high and do 1, 2, 3, and I do, or I'll like do this ritual where I would put my TV to the loudest point and I'd put my head down and put it up. And if I didn't do it, then I'm not going to grow up to be like 6 feet tall. And that would affect my basketball. Like these obsessive compulsive thoughts. So I did have that stuff. So my mom wasn't completely wrong. But my mom wants to say that I was abused because of obsessive compulsive disorder. No, it was because my dad got the shoot away machine. So I admit I had obsessive compulsive disorder in a sense, but it wasn't that bad. But but that's not the reason I was abused. The reason I was abused was because of the shoot away machine. Like I said, the essence of it is I was always the best shooter because I would move into it just natural. I would catch the ball and kind of step back and then do this and kind of be sideways, right? I'd catch it, and, step back, like if I was on this side, I'd catch it right leg this way and then step like this, right? But you can't do that picking up off the shoe rack. When I picked up off the shoe rack, I'd catch it. My dad got the shoe rack and I go straight forward, and I make my left foot go forward and my right foot forward. And my dad told me later, okay, well then spin into it. And that's not how good shooter shoots. So I'd be in the games catching it and spinning sideways, and that's not how good shooter shoot. I never did that. No good shooter does that. But my dad messed me up. But but just to kind of, now this is a kind of one that's going to be like, I'm reluctant to tell people because it's very strange. But I remember this was like, and people are going to probably think, oh, you're probably mentally ill. I'm not mentally ill, but people are going to think like I'm making this up. But it was probably my freshman year. It was my freshman year of college. I was playing at basketball at UCSD, and I remember I was sitting at the cafeteria. I think it was like it was called like the OT. I forget what it was called, but I was at the cafeteria and I was looking out the cafeteria, and it looked like things were very light. Like it looked like almost now because my grandpa would teach me this stuff. So I don't know how much of my grandpa's teachings were influencing my perceptions, and maybe this is a grandiosity thing. Maybe because I had been abused and I felt. And also things were bad. My shot was messed up and stuff. I wanted to compensate by imagining myself as a sort of as in a grandiose manner, like, oh look, I'm seeing reality as vibrant, right? But my grandpa would teach me that Moses, when he saw the burning bush, my grandpa would say that Moses saw that there is no physical matter, that everything is energy, that there is no matter. And that's kind of what Dr. Horod taught. But Dr. Horod taught more that things are a dream. But my grandpa tried to make things more scientific and materialistic and say everything is energy. But I'll get to that more later and how that confused me. But so my grandpa was teaching me this, right? So I was looking out of the window at OVT. I think it was called OVT. It was a cafeteria. And I remember like maybe because my perceptions were being affected by my desire to be like Moses. And I was like, wow, I'm looking at things and I see them like very like energy. So but I did kind of. At least that's what I think. So I don't know. I don't know if I was really seeing it that way. But I remember I was earlier that day. My the trainer, the weight trainer, was saying, he told us. Now this is where it gets interesting because this was before I discovered the quadrant model. But this kind of so the fact that I was having this kind of extraordinary experience. If I were to just say it to you, you would be like, okay, whatever. You might have just been it might have just been your imagination and so on and so forth, right? But the fact that it happened when I had a interaction or with the quadrant model, before I discovered the quadrant model. Now, I'm not making this up. And now I see, like I said, I'm reluctant to even say this story because it's going to make people think like this is way too weird. But I think it was earlier that day, and you could probably ask if someone ever gets in contact with the weight training coach from UCSD at that time, he would probably vouch that he told us this. He said, in order to be successful, you need 3 things. He said, and I wrote this down in my book thing, like I was carrying a notepad, right? But he said, to be successful, you need 3 things. You need, and I'm pretty sure he said space, time, and resources. And I remember in my notepad, I wrote space, time, resources, but I thought to myself, what about a 4th thing? I'm not even making this up. And I wrote it down. And this is before I discovered the quadrant model. I was thinking, what about a 4th thing? What about knowledge? Because I was thinking, yeah, you can have space, time, and resources, but if you don't have knowledge, then you can't utilize the space, time, and resources. So I'm not even making that up. That actually happened. So I was sitting in the OVT, and so I'm having this kind of like extraordinary sensual experience, and it happened to correspond with that quadrant example. I'm not making this up, okay? And again, but I remember I walked out of the OVT and I was standing near bushes, and I remember I was just like gazing into the bushes, and then I saw the bushes kind of like dissolve into each other, right? And then I was like, whoa, I just had a burning bush experience. Now again, was this because I wanted to see myself as like Moses? And maybe I was, because like I said, I was going through a schizophrenic type of, I don't think I ever was schizophrenic, but I was going through what people would describe as I was very schizotypal at the time. Had very magical thinking, and I was experiencing things, okay? So, but I had that experience. So, and again, was this because I was trying to compensate? You know, that's what my grandpa would maybe teach me later. Like, maybe I was trying to compensate for, you know, because of the abuse that happened to me and because my shot got messed up and all that stuff. I wanted to see myself in a grandiose way and see myself as like Moses. So I just had a burning bush experience because I was staring at the bush and I saw the things like dissolve into each other. I saw the bushes, the leaves dissolve, because I was really just daydreaming. But, you know, when you kind of blur your vision, and I was like, whoa, I just had a burning bush experience. But the fact that I had the burning bush experience at the same time because I was at the OVT center and I was thinking about what my coach had said about the 3 things. I wrote it down. And the fact that I can remember this is kind of astonishing. But I wrote it down, space, time, resources, and then I wrote the 4th, knowledge. There should be knowledge too. And the fact that I had that burning bush, it was really literally a burning bush experience, but I didn't necessarily see the bush burning. I saw them like dissolve into each other, which my grandpa would say, yeah, what you recognize was that physical reality is an illusion, okay? So then I called my grandpa and I was like, Grandpa, I had a burning bush experience. I was staring at the bush and the leaves dissolved, and I think I experienced what probably Moses experienced, because I wanted to see myself as like Moses. I wanted to see myself as the Messiah, but I always saw myself as a Messiah, like I said, ever since I was in preschool. So then that happened, okay? So that's one example of something strange. And then the other thing is, like I said, it was on Thanksgiving, and my family came up to UC San Diego, and or they came up to San Diego because we had Thanksgiving in my aunt's house, and my tape recorder broke, and I'd always send my raps into the tape recorder. So this time, so I wasn't able to write my raps, but then I started free writing because I didn't have my tape recorder. My dad was fixing my tape recorder, it was fixing the tape recorder on my phone. So I was free writing, and that's when I developed my free writing style. And like I said, I discovered later I could only write raps when I was nervous, but I'll get to that later. But because I was playing basketball at UCSD, I was nervous at the time, so I was free writing, and I wrote these amazing raps. And again, but now, like I said, I've mentioned this before, I was writing raps where, like, on one of the raps I wrote, I was going to a party at UCSD with the basketball team. I stopped at a red light, and I wrote my rap. And in my rap, I wrote, and it's only for the Magic Four, me and Afam and Ray. The other one is unnamed. I wrote that before I discovered the quadrant model. The Magic Four, me and Afam and Ray. The other one is unnamed. A 3 + 1. And it was, like I said, it was almost like an unconscious writing style. They call it automatic writing. I was automatic writing, where I was barely conscious of what I was doing when I was doing it. So again, if you look back at that, you'd be like, okay, well, it could be just coincidence and stuff. But the fact that I was in touch and expressing the quadrant pattern unknowingly, that's astonishing. And the fact that I did it not just that one time. If you go through the raps I wrote during that time, my freshman year in college, my freshman and sophomore years, before I discovered the quadrant model, they were permeated with quadrant pattern examples, with fours, everywhere. Now, and that's, and I have to tell you, and I was free writing. I was conscious of what I was doing, but it was also in the same time kind of unconscious. Like, I'm very intuitive. Like I said, I would try not to say what I wanted to say, but I'd be like, I know that I would write, and I know that an L sound needs to go here, and I put an L sound in. It was very automatic, very spontaneous. And the fact that I was doing it automatically and I was expressing the quadrant pattern, that's pretty incredible. Now, another example was like I said, before I won the AU National Championship when I was 9 years old, I remember I was at Tennessee, and before every game there was a penny. So this is magical thinking, but I always had magical thinking. And my dad kind of reinforced it, because my dad would teach me to knock on wood. If you ever have a negative thought, knock on wood. So this is that kind of a magical thinking where you think that your thoughts are affecting reality, but that's actually what my grandpa taught, or what my grandpa's teacher, Dr. Hora, taught. My grandpa was a metapsychiatrist, got a PhD in metapsychiatry, but metapsychiatry is kind of delusional, magical thinking, like the idea that it's new age, you create your reality. But my dad kind of reinforced that with me. But my grandpa would teach that, but he confused me, because then my grandpa would try to dumb it down later, and I'll get to that. Because he tried to make it more rational and be like, well, you don't really create your reality, but you do affect it with your software, blah, blah, blah. So he tried to make things more rational and materialistic, and that was actually worse, because then I never really understood what Dr. Hora taught, But so I would have the kind of magical thinking, and before every game I would go to the penny that was under the bed. It was on its upside, like a shiny penny. It was probably on its head. And I would go before every game, and we won it, and then we ended up winning the national championship. And before the first game, I don't think I did it when we lost to Tennessee in the pool play. But then every game after that, I checked on that penny, and then we won every game. Now that's magical thinking. Was it because of the lucky penny? That would be magical thinking. People would say that that's OCD or kind of like schizotypal type of thinking. But it happened. And I remember when I was at UCSD, LeBron James was having a basketball camp. And like I said, I was working at the basketball camp because I was working at Remax Center. and one day I was working at the Remax Center, and there was pennies in the car, a lot of pennies. Okay, and I was like, that's a good sign. Again, it's kind of schizotypal, kind of magical thinking. But then later that day, I'm about to go to sleep, and I get a call, and they're like, hey, Ryan, you know, LeBron James needs a rebounder. Can you do it? And like earlier that day, I remember I saw all the pennies in the car. Someone had left like a bunch of pennies, like shiny pennies. And I was like, that's a good sign. Some really good stuff's going to happen today. 'Cause again, it's kind of schizotypal, kind of magical thinking, kind of superstitious. But then I get a call later that day. Hey, Ryan, can you be LeBron? So the rest of that camp, I was LeBron James' personal rebounder. I was rebounding for LeBron James. Now, again, is this me trying to be grandiose, me telling you this story and like, look how amazing I am? Not, but at the time, my shot was messed up. Everything was messed up, but I was LeBron James' personal rebounder, So like stuff like that's going on. But again, I'm just trying to show that my thought process at this time, this is in college, I was kind of schizotypal. I was, like I said, I was following signs. Like, I started to, it was like my sophomore year, I started to write, I started to talk to a bunch of people, and I knew I was on the verge of a huge discovery. Like, and I remember I told one of my teammates, I was like, I'm writing a book to try to show that reality is an illusion. And so, but I hadn't discovered the quadrant model yet, but I just knew it. So, I was trying to discover that. So I remember like I was, I started writing and like I said, I was kind of following signs. Like if I saw white birds, I would follow them. If I saw black birds, I would stop what I'm doing and stuff like that. Or like black cats and stuff like that. Kind of superstitious, kind of schizotypal. But I ended up discovering the theory of everything. And like I said, the way that I was seeing things, and my grandpa kind of reinforced it, was my grandpa would say, what we think in secret comes to pass, the world is but a looking glass. And his idea was that, you kind of create your reality, right? But then he would, like I said, he would later try to back off of that, because, that is, people would say that is a pathological way of thinking. That actually is a symptom of mental illness. And at that time, my grandpa probably didn't think I was, going to ever be mentally ill. And I was never mentally ill. But, later people would think I was. But I'll get to how my parents ended up being dumbasses. But, I was thinking, okay, my grandpa's kind of teaching me reality is an illusion, so I took it to an extreme, and I always had this kind of intuition. I was like, yes, reality is like a dream. So yes, if reality is like a dream, the internal and the external are one. And that's actually what Dr. Hora taught. That was my grandpa's teacher, who my grandpa got his PhD in. He would say that you create the storm because the internal and the external are actually one. But that's the way I was seeing things. I was saying it's a dream. We're in like a dream. So I can get signs. The dream can tell me things, like when I would see the spider, and then when I was with that girl, the girl wanted to have sex with me, and she said, "Don't worry, Ryan, I don't bite." And I looked and I saw the spider, and I decided not to have sex with her. Like I said, I didn't have sex until I was 23 years old, and I had a lot of opportunities, but I didn't do it because a part of it was those signs, but also because I was trying to follow my grandpa's teachings, and he was saying sex is self-confirmatory and stuff, right? But my point is, I was kind of seeing things in a spiritual way. But again, though, I'm going to get to this. I was very Marxist, and I wanted race mixing. So that's an interesting thing. So like I said, I was very into, like, my grandpa was teaching me, if you're in the flow, you're not attached to anything. And I like these ideas because I was like, yeah, don't be attached to anything, like the Marxists. Because I was always kind of anti-white because I saw myself as Jewish, so I was kind of anti-white. So I was like, yeah, the Marxists, they're not attached to anything. We should all be like communists and not be attached to anything. That's so I said, like I said, I kind of was very intrigued, and I grasped on these spiritual teachings, but I misinterpreted them because my grandpa was not a Marxist. My grandpa was kind of an Ayn Rand fan, and he was kind of against Marxism. But I would interpret my grandpa's teachings. He'd be like, if you're in the flow, you're not attached to anything. So I'd be like, yeah, let's all. So like, just one example of that would be, like, I remember there was at UCSD, there was like there was a wall of black millionaires. A wall for black millionaires, and it had like all these millionaires who are black people, and it had like Michael Jordan and Oprah Winfrey and people like that, right? And I remember I said to myself, like, and I talked to my aunt about this, and I was like, Aunt Rachel, I don't like the wall because because in my mind it reinforced capitalism. I was like, why don't they have a wall of black teachers or black people who help the community? Why does it have to be millionaires? This is, to me, it was like reinforcing capitalism. And it was also, and I was like, I also don't like the wall because it's saying black millionaires, but it's reinforcing the illusion or the social construction that there is black people and white people, and it's maintaining division. But again, because I saw myself as Jewish, I think I wanted race mixing, because I was like, white and black are social construction, and that's what my teachers are teaching, and that's why I loved UCSD so much, because they're saying it's a social construction. I'm like, yeah, it's a social construction. Why don't we have a wall of black millionaires? Why don't we just have a wall of people who, of teachers and people who are helpful to the community? And, why do we have to reinforce capitalism with this whole millionaire idea, and also black millionaires, when black is a social construction? And because in my mind, I didn't want division. I wanted people to just get rid of the illusion of black and white. And I wanted black people to mix with white people. And I wanted intermarriage, and I wanted race mixing, and I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm just following my grandpa's teachings. Don't be attached to anything. Don't be attached to your identity of black and white. But at the same time, though, I was attached, because I think it was because I saw myself as Jewish. I was attached to that, and I wanted race mixing because I saw white people as a threat. And I always kind of looked down upon white people, and I always looked highly upon black people and people of color, but I wasn't aware of that. I didn't have that recognition at that time. So I'll get more into this in future lectures.